See some familiar faces, I see some new faces. This is great. So I am Jeremy Moss. I'm the state senator for our district here in Oakland County and a portion of the city of Detroit. I'm joined by State Representative Jason Hoskins, who's the state representative here for Southfield and Lathrop Village and Farmington and Farmington Hills and Oak Park, portions of those communities. So we do this once a month here in Southfield, and I also do this once a month in Bloomfield with the Bloomfield area representatives, where we basically just kind of give a summary of what's been going on in Lansing, and maybe just also a preview of what's to come from the legislature in the next month. So I will hand it off to Representative Hoskins to introduce himself and maybe talk about some topics that he's interested in. I know many of you, rightfully so, as I also am just as concerned about what's going on with ICE. We can certainly talk about that. It's obviously been a big topic in the last 30 days here in our community. So I can definitely take the lead on chatting about that and some next steps. I know many of you have joined in on the protests over at the One Town Square building. But I'll kick it off to Rep. Hoskins to lead off.
Sure. There have been certainly a number of things that have been going on in Lansing. I hate to say surprisingly, our Speaker in the House, he said he has these press conferences every week. And in one of his press conferences, he said he wants this to be the least productive legislature ever.
Are you being serious?
Yes.
I wish I weren't. It is a sad state of affairs when that is something that a sitting speaker says, and he wants to help less people and pass less legislation. I don't know how serious that is. I pray it's not that serious. But even with that, we are still doing a lot of the work. At the committee level, we are certainly introducing legislation to make sure that we are letting the residents of Michigan know that we hear them and we hear their concerns. And one of the things that we introduced last week was legislation around gun violence prevention. And this is something that certainly is very important to Senator Moss and I. Last term, we were able to get through some gun violence prevention legislation, legislation that had taken years for us to get through, around safe storage of guns, around background checks, and extreme risk protection orders. And last week we introduced a set of bills that kind of build on that, dealing with holding gun manufacturers liable when their guns are used in gun violence. We had legislation around banning bump stocks, which, if you don't know what that does, it basically turns a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. Banning high-capacity magazines. I had legislation that would ban Capitals and ban guns in the Capitol building and in our House and Senate office buildings. And these are things, and we did this, to be quite frank with you, because of how the legislature is set up currently, those bills probably aren't going to go through. But we are setting the groundwork for what we think hopefully happen next term. And those are the things that, as we're working on legislation now, we're always thinking about, at some point, I'm in the minority party right now. I hope one day to be back in the majority again, and when we do get back into the majority, I'm hoping that we will have laid the groundwork. We would have done the work on the front end to be able to get legislation ready to go. And these are the bills that we think are some of those bills that are going to be important as we go into next year. Senator Moss has certainly done a lot with gun violence prevention, helping create the gun violence prevention task force caucus. I can't remember what we were calling it.
Gun Violence Prevention Caucus.
One of the founding members with are now Oakland County Treasurer Robert Whittenburg. And this is something that's certainly been important to us, and certainly something we will continue to fight for, because it is not something, I mean, it's one of these things in politics and government which is one of the most frustrating things that I have to deal with, because it's one of the most solvable things. There's so many things that it is hard to really tackle when you're working in government, but this one is easy. And the only thing that is keeping us from doing it is numbers. We just don't have enough numbers in a lot of different levels, but as soon as we get there, we can really tackle this problem and save some lives. So there's one thing that I'm hopeful that at some point we will get this stuff through. We do have a lot of support, especially now. I think that hopefully if things change next year, we'll be able to do a lot of great work on those things. But that's one thing that we are working on in the legislature. I can stop there if anyone has questions or thoughts on that.
Well, you know I do. I would be interested to know what kind of studies we do, and where, you know, if there is discussion about whether all these laws help the problem. I don't think so. I don't think any of these laws that we keep passing that says this is illegal and that's illegal and this is illegal addresses the issue of crime. I would like to see more emphasis on what causes crime and addressing that. I think all these laws banning this and making this illegal and that illegal are counterproductive.
I'll give you an example of a law that has worked. It's the red flag law. So we passed 3 gun safety laws in the last time that we had a gun safety majority in the legislature. Obviously we don't in the House right now, which is unfortunate. And the 3 bills that we passed, or 3 packages that we passed, one is expanding background checks for the state. Right now, before, the law referenced pistols have to be subjected to a background check. Well, that doesn't include long guns or rifles, so we changed the word pistol to firearms so that every firearm purchased in the state of Michigan is subject to a background check. That's pretty important. The second one, it requires that a household with a minor in it, that the gun be safely stored and locked. Of course, I think to your point, that only works if people follow the law, right? If people don't follow the law and lock up their guns, there's a huge challenge there. But at least it's a requirement, and any place where a gun is sold, they have to actually have a notification out there that says this firearm must be safely stored if your home has a minor in it. It's important. The third is red flag laws. And they've been proven successful around the country. They've even been proven successful around here in Michigan. So what it is basically it's a restraining order from somebody from having ownership of a firearm if they make a threat against themselves or others. And it goes through the court process, due process, and a judge just determines for what period of time are they separated from their firearm. And it can be petitioned by law enforcement. So if somebody's on the radar of law enforcement for making threats, and they have a firearm and they're able to carry out those threats, law enforcement could go to court, or an immediate family member can go to court. Since this became law in 2023, this has been issued 400 times. So you kind of got to think about, there are probably 400 tragedies that may have happened here in the state of Michigan that we don't know about because they didn't happen. Because that red flag, that extreme risk protection order, that's what it's called, has been issued. This is something that actually first started in Indiana, a red state, after the Parkland shooting in Florida at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School several years ago. The legislature, the Republican legislature, fast-tracked this legislation. Because this is a tool that law enforcement is asking for. Because there are so many times where somebody has made a threat and they can't do anything about it until it actually happens. Yeah. So 400 instances in the state of Michigan so far in the last 3 years, an extreme risk protection order has been issued. And you never know what incident, what mass shooting has been prevented because of that.
What was the name of that law again?
It's called, the whole thing is called Extreme Risk Protection Order, ERPO, but it's typically called a red flag law, literally raising the red flag on somebody. And so I'll say this too, you know, they work if you know about it. They work if people are concerned about their brother or their family member or their father or whomever. And so you can petition the court. You can also go to your county clerk's office. County clerks can take in the process of processing that protection order, and it goes to a judge, and there's due process, and you know there has to be adequate evidence that this person, number one, has access to firearms, or number one, has made the threat, and number two, has access to firearms to carry out the threat. But this has been an effective tool that law enforcement has asked for to head off the next tragedy. We don't permanently ban somebody from owning a firearm. It's a constitutional right. If it turns out they are mentally sound and you know something was misunderstood, but for a period of time that they're under this process, they are separated. They actually go in and take the firearms from the home from somebody if the judge determines that the order is necessary.
And you don't have to go through front of the court, you can go through through the county.
You go through the normal court system, that's right. Yeah.
Does it have to be an explicit threat, or could it be like erratic behavior?
It's something that's determined by the court. That's determined by the petition as it's filled out, and then the judge makes the determination. I mean, there are guardrails on it. You can't, and there's penalties for falsely issuing or falsely beginning the process. If I didn't like somebody and I said this person shouldn't have their gun, and that was just a lie, I'm the one that's subjected to penalties. So there are guardrails on this as well. Yeah. Yeah, Jimmy.
Unfortunately, just to give kind of direction to the law and the courts and everything here, the CDC is now, again, refused to do any studies on gun violence.
It goes to your question too. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Trump's administration has banned the CDC from really determining what a public health crisis gun violence is, and finding out the remedies and finding out the things that have been utilized successfully. It's horrible. Yeah. Yeah.
I've read a few things lately about they're trying to change some of the concealed carry laws.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, that's not going to go anywhere because our majority, I do serve in the majority in the Senate, you know, we're not going to change the process. You know, they call it constitutional carry, the people who advocate for this, that basically would require no permit whatsoever to have a firearm. No license, no background check, no permit. Obviously, these things have been tested. They are constitutional. It is congruent to have a permit and have your Second Amendment rights. It is congruent to have a background check and have your Second Amendment rights. And so there are folks who just basically want to turn this into the Wild Wild West, and we in the Senate are making sure that those guardrails, that those safety measures are still in place. So it's been introduced time and time again in the legislature, basically to not require any permit or background check for owning a firearm, and we would not allow that. We would not entertain those bills. Yeah.
I'm looking at the one about manufacturers. Can you speak to what kinds of stuff you were trying to address, introducing the torts against manufacturers? Like what kind of recklessness, etc.?
Yeah, so for decades now, much like with smoking, we have determined that when gun manufacturers these are weapons, right? These aren't something that, oh, I use my gun like a knife, right? You use your knife for a lot of different things. A gun is designed for one thing. And so we've always felt that it is simply reckless to not have the protections in place, the guardrails in place when you are selling weapons. And gun manufacturers have for years, for decades, put things in place that have protected them from liability. Much like smoking, tobacco companies. In Michigan, we had a very strict immunity laws when it came to drug manufacturers that we actually repealed last term when we had the majority. And so the aim of this legislation in particular is to not shield the gun manufacturers from liability when they are known to be selling weapons that are danger to people without the guardrails. I can get you more information on specifically what those bills look like and the specific guardrails that we're trying to put in place. But we want to make sure that we want to hold gun manufacturers accountable when they are selling these weapons.
Well, you're talking about manufacturers.
Yes.
We don't have manufacturers in Michigan, we have sellers in Michigan.
They will, the gun manufacturers, no matter where they
It says
are,
firearm industry member, presumably that would be sellers
Right,
as well.
so they sell them here, they don't manufacture them.
but we also want to make sure, no matter where you are headquartered, I mean, you are bringing your product here, and that's what's subject you to the liability, your product to that liability.
Didn't the federal government, under Trump, say that you can't, I don't know, it was an executive order or law or whatever, saying that you can't, so wouldn't that supersede what we did in Michigan?
In this, in Trump's America, it's hard to tell what,
Exactly.
like it's an executive order every day on something, something new. But, we're trying to do everything we can at the state level. And of course, this would be a lot easier if there were federal legislation in place to stop all of this, so then we wouldn't have to do these things at the state level at piecemeal. But a lot of these things do help. I mean, it's little bits, and we're all doing our part. Could you go to Indiana and get around some of these things? Sure. But if it saves one life, that's one life that I'm willing to put this legislation through to help.
So with tag on to manufacturers, 3D printers. what
They're
is
called
being
ghost
done?
guns. Yeah.
And we have legislation on that too.
We
The
have,
ban.
I don't know if it got through the House last time, but we introduced legislation in the Senate to ban ghost guns. That could be either assembled or printed. I'll tell you kind of an absolute bonkers crazy story that literally happened. So we had a hearing on ghost guns, banning ghost guns in the Michigan Senate. And there is a ban on firearms in the state capitol. There wasn't for the longest time, and when I served through COVID and through the protests of the 2020 election, people came into the Capitol to jeer us and intimidate us, and were carrying firearms into the Capitol while doing so. And it wasn't until both January 6th and the plot to kidnap the governor, which also included to kill all of the rest of us, we didn't get that, in the story, but we're all under threat, that we actually had the Capitol Commission set up metal detectors, gun detectors in the Capitol, so you can no longer carry a firearm into the Capitol. That's an important piece of the story. So we have this hearing on banning ghost guns, and there's this.
If I could interrupt, the ghost guns may not have any metal in them.
Yeah, right, that's exactly right. So somebody testified against the ban on these ghost guns, or these guns that you can assemble on your own, and he brought the kit with him into the Capitol, which it wasn't a firearm when he brought it into the Capitol, but he could have just assembled it there on the table and it would have been a firearm. Therefore, he wasn't detected by the gun detector. It's really not necessarily a metal detector. We have so much technology. You know how you go through some of these things, they're literally only looking for guns. We have that at the Capitol. So he walked into the building with this kit, wasn't a firearm when he walked in, but nothing's to stop him from going into the bathroom and assembling it together, and then he gets a gun into the Capitol. That's the craziness with these ghost guns, is that wherever you enter into, it may not be a gun when you enter, but it could be a gun when you get inside. So we've begun the process, we've introduced legislation, they got through the Senate, I don't think it got through the House last term, to ban ghost guns. And that, we're trying to catch up with the latest apparatuses that have created firearms, and we're doing our best to keep up with the law. It's very, very challenging with all these new things. We've introduced the same bills that Jason's talked about in the Senate. One additional bill that I've sponsored is to limit high-capacity magazines. You know, sometimes the only instance to stop a mass shooting when it happens is the break between which they've run out of the round and are reloading a new one into it. When you have these high capacity magazines, there's no break in the shooting. And so we're trying to ban these high capacity magazines, so at least there's a pause in the action where survivors can flee, where somebody can tackle the gunman. So I have the bill that would limit the amount in what would be a high capacity magazine.
What's your limit?
So I can I'll get you more of the language of the bill. Yeah.
One would be great.
Yeah, it's not one, but yes, point taken. Point taken.
Zero.
Yeah. So we've pushed forward on firearm safety. We've introduced bills in the House and the Senate. We've achieved a lot. We have a long way to go. Yeah, in the back.
On the point of mag limits and bump stock bans, I want to say in the last few years the Supreme Court actually ruled those kinds of bans unconstitutional. Is that right?
I don't think so, because we've introduced these bills and some of these things have been implemented in other states. So I would have to check on that or find out more information about what specifically you have heard, because we've reintroduced these bills session after session and nobody's flagged it that it would be unconstitutional according to the Supreme Court.
And it's no more than
It was
10 rounds. for the
Classic,
magazines.
the agency overstepped its bounds. Not that the kind of law is unconstitutional, but that the agency that tried to do it didn't have the power to do it. That was the issue.
There was also a period of time after that Las Vegas shooting that even Donald Trump called for a ban on bump stocks, and Congress did nothing about it. So, I mean, the reality is that they're safety measures, they're responsible, they head off the next tragedy, and they're popular. It's just, the NRA has a stranglehold over certain members of Congress that none of this stuff can get through federally, so we have to take it state by state by state. And you hear that Jason looked up the language, it's no more than 10 rounds.
Concerning the manufacturers being responsible, there was a court case, I want to say about a decade and a half ago, against McDonald's and obesity. That case was lost, and that could be used as a prerequisite for yours, just to let you know, because it had to do with a person's will and eating a hamburger and a person's will to pick up a gun and shooting someone. Just FYI, that might be something you might have to face down the road. As we're talking about gun laws and safety, the child Rowan for Rowan's Act was killed by their father with a gun. Is there any more information on Rowan's Act? Has it passed the Senate? I know it's passed the House, but has it passed the Senate yet?
No, we have not, no, and I know it's not in a committee that I serve on, so I have to check, I have to ask the committee chair what the status of that is. I feel like we've talked about this before, do you know what margins it passed by? Do you remember this bill?
It passed pretty high. Everybody agreed to it.
Yeah, I'll have to check on that because it has not come up on my radar. I know I don't serve on the committee and it goes through a committee hearing first. So I'll have to check to see what the status of that is and hopefully get you an update when we're in Bloomfield next.
Which committee would that be?
Do you have the bill number offhand?
No, I didn't write that.
That's okay. We can look it up.
We'll track it now.
We'll track it. I know, I'll have to see which committee it was referred to. All right, so that's kind of, the reason we're talking about this is because these are the bills that we've introduced this past week. There's still a lot of other action going on in the legislature. I can definitely talk about ICE because I think that is important for our community about what's been going on here. So obviously, many people know there's an attempt to open up a new ICE detention center in Romulus, and a lease that is being brokered, I guess, with the U.S. government to have ICE's lawyers and administrators in the building right over here at One Town Square. That is a private lease transaction that can only be canceled by the building owner, which is Redico, and we are really compelling them to rethink honoring this lease. It's been very challenging for our community to grapple with what's been going on around the country, and we don't want this type of activity here in the city of Southfield or in the Metro Detroit region. The reality is that this would be a new ICE facility, so it leads to a lot more questions than answers. Why is ICE ramping up its presence here in Metro Detroit? There is no indication that crime is going up. as a result of immigration. There is no measurement that this new officers, this new detention facility, this new administrative office is needed here in our community. It just makes you wonder if they're taking people out of Minneapolis and putting them into Detroit. And so, for folks who are finding this challenging, I agree with you. We've introduced 3 pieces of legislation in the state legislature to rein in ICE's activity here in the state of Michigan as much as we can do in state law. Number 1 would be my bill that would ban all law enforcement, federal or state, from using masks for the purpose of concealing their identity here in the state of Michigan. We would still allow masks for health, still allow masks for undercover operations, but for the purpose of solely concealing your identity, we would ban the use of any officer in the state of Michigan from wearing a mask and require that there be an identifiable uniform. Again, not for covert or undercover operations, but in everyday law enforcement, we would require an identifiable uniform for any officer operating in the state of Michigan. That's the bill that I've sponsored. We've also sponsored legislation from Senators Chang and Kavanaugh to allow for or require safe spaces to be protected from unwarranted lawless ICE raids. So that ICE could not conduct a warrantless operation in a school where kids go to school, in a hospital, in a court. And I will tell you, there are people who are going through the immigration process and are meeting every meeting and going through every hearing that they need to do it, quote, the right way. And ICE has been exploiting those people while they are in process and going to court and picking them up at court. That's shameless.
Now in airports.
Yep. Airports as well. Yeah, we would also protect domestic violence shelters and other sensitive locations from ICE warrantless and blanket ICE activity. And then the third bill is we would protect your personal private data that's housed in state government. A lot's housed in the health department and other places from being misused and abused and exploited by ICE's operations unless they had a warrant to do so. So that's what we're doing on the state level. Mind you, on the federal level, there's a lot of things that can be done. I think that the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, should be not funded for directing funds into this agency. This agency has broken the public trust. There's a rot in it from top to bottom. I don't believe that rot can be repaired under Donald Trump. And so there's a lot of activity in Congress about whether or not to even continue to fund the Department of Homeland Security from even keeping this agency in operation, because there are so many challenges. I believe every officer who we've seen on tape, who we've seen on video, ICE lies to us and tells us not to believe our own eyes with what they're doing. I believe any officer who has broken the law should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I believe we need an interior agency that first protects the people that it serves, and we've seen instead they've killed protesters in the street, they've breached due process, they've stripped our constitutional rights, they've engaged in racial profiling, they've kidnapped children and sent them away, and it's just horrible what's going on. We have to have an interior agency that believes in due process, in constitutional rights, and has safe outcomes. And I don't think that ICE is it. So we're doing everything we can do at the state level to rein it in. I know that many of you have continued to protest this facility both in Romulus and in Southfield to demonstrate that this does not comport with how we want to run our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are civil and harmonious and diverse, and we benefit from that. And having ICE in this community is a disruptor to that. So I've been outspoken on this, we'll continue to do so. And I appreciate everybody who has been engaged in this process. Yeah, hand in the back.
Okay, so when you say introduce bill, you know, I'm looking at time frame. How long would it take, and when is the ICE facility going to be at that one town square?
Yeah, so we've introduced legislation last fall, even before this. We've given it hearings, and we're trying to get the votes to make sure it can get out of committee, and then it will come to the full Senate floor for action. So the more, if I'm your state senator, trust me, I support it. I'm one of the sponsors. But the more that you write to other state senators and share your perspective in support of this legislation, the more likely we can assure that it would pass in the Senate. Now the reality is we have very many challenges in the House, and so you have to continue to beat the drum for House members and the Speaker of the House to take up this legislation. But we're doing everything we can to move this legislation with a majority vote so that it will get out of the Senate. In terms of the lease, I'll be honest with you, I really don't know the timeline of the lease. I'm not privy to that information. It's a private lease between a building owner and its tenant. The tenant happens to be the US government, and they have indicated they are housing ICE lawyers in there. So we've kept the pressure on, even on that street corner there, to make sure that our voices are heard. And you can email the building owner. We can get that information to let them know that you're a community member and you have a concern about this coming into our community.
I'm wondering if we can't stop the other facility, the detention facility, what can the state do to put some guardrails about humane treatment in that, and how many people they could put in it, how they're housed? I'm wondering how many people have died in these facilities. That number has never been, you hear about it here or there, somebody that was denied medical treatment or whatever else. I'm just wondering what the real number of people who died under ICE.
In order of fire
what Michigan
safety.
can do if we can't stop it to protect the people that are put in there.
In 2025, there were more people that died in ICE detention than any other year in the agency's 20-plus year history. It's incredibly alarming. And I have not toured any of these facilities. I think a member of Congress can, but a state legislator cannot. But I've heard about the deplorable conditions, the inhumane conditions that are going on there. I even heard a story about how terrible that they're treating people who want to advocate for people who are in detention. One woman came up to me because we held a hearing on our bills. We held a hearing locally on our bills in Detroit, just to get more testimony from folks who've engaged in this. There was a woman who was in line to advocate for somebody who was in detention, and the metal in her bra set off the alarm. And they said to her, "You have to take it off. You cannot come in if you're going to, we cannot have any of this metal, going through into our facility." So she had to adjust herself and take it off, and then they wouldn't allow her in because she wasn't wearing a bra. So it's absolutely ridiculous, the way that they've been brazenly operating these facilities. The food is abysmal, is our reports that we heard in our testimony. Obviously, their due process is totally being abutted, if not just totally ignored. And so, yeah, it's very challenging. The question is, what can we do? Obviously, these are federal facilities and are subject to federal oversight. The 3 bills that we've introduced are as far as we can go on the state level. On the local level, I think it's important for local communities to put forward a few things. A local community can do one of 3 things, and I think you should advocate for your local community to do so. Number 1, a statement of values, that this is something that we cannot sustain, this is something that we do not support, and that we support the Senate bills moving through the process. So just a statement of values from a community. Oak Park came up with a really solid one that I think can be a model, a template for other communities to look at. Number 2, zoning. We still have zoning. That can assure that certain facilities cannot exist in certain areas of the community, that they have to adhere to certain setbacks, adhere to certain different structures, adhere to overnight stays and all that. So strengthening our zoning laws at the local level is incredibly important too, to make sure that these facilities have pushback. They're trying to do this in Romulus. The mayor and the local council in Romulus do not want this. But again, it's a private transaction between whatever facility owned the building and the federal government. But the mayor of Romulus, I know, and the legislators are trying to do what they can to push back. And number 3, an affirmation or even a directive that your local law enforcement, they're doing this in Detroit, as you've seen, the local law enforcement is not supposed to collaborate with Border Patrol or ICE. If it's needed, if it's required, that's one thing. But they should not be deputized to conduct Border Patrol and ICE's missions in our community. Your local law enforcement, your local police department, and anybody in local government can tell you, is already stretched thin. They're already in charge of a lot. Our local law enforcement should be in charge of enforcing state law and local ordinances. They should not be deputized to be federal immigration officials. So having your local government affirm or even direct the local police department that their job is to enforce state law and city ordinances is important. And in the city of Detroit, there were 2 officers that breached that policy. And they were sanctioned as a result from that. They called in Border Patrol when the protocols would not have allowed them, would not have required them to call in Border Patrol. We need more of that in our local communities.
Here's another thing, I don't know, I think in another state they were talking about every individual, police or that type of agency had to be registered in the state. You talked about personal identification, I'm assuming, you know, like you'd have to wear it. I'm assuming that's personal identification.
Well, they would have to have their name available. Like
As
sometimes,
opposed to just saying ICE.
sometimes they don't even say ICE. They wear flannel shirts and
Right.
kind of these pull-up masks and say. And I'll tell you another thing, and I'm sorry to step on you, Jamie. It's not just unsafe for us that ICE agents aren't being identified as ICE agents. There are people who are posing as ICE agents that aren't ICE agents.
Right.
And they're going in and committing crimes saying that they're ICE, because when you don't have a required for a uniform or an identifiable, you know, you're wearing a mask to conceal your identity, any one of us can pose as ICE. And so that people across the country have committed crimes by posing as ICE, and there's no uniform required because they don't wear uniforms. They're not required to wear uniforms.
But there can be, from what I understood, and this is just kind of hearsay really, that we can have every police force in the state has to be at least registered.
Yeah, so every police officer that is
Federal or anybody acting in the state.
they have to be licensed by MCOLS here in the state of Michigan, the Michigan something, MCOLS. And so we have challenges of requiring federal law enforcement to adhere to that, where we are getting the basis for requiring all police officers, law enforcement in Michigan to not wear masks for the purpose of concealing their identity, is that law enforcement still has to abide by generally applicable law. A police officer cannot run a red light for the purpose of just running the red light and saying, well, I'm a police officer. They still have to follow the law the same way that you and I do. So what we're saying, blanket, no matter what level of law enforcement you are in the state of Michigan, nobody can conceal their identity, can wear a mask for the purpose of concealing their identity. That's kind of the legal argument we're making with introducing these bills. However, I don't believe we would be allowed to require federal law enforcement to be certified by MCOLS. I don't know that.
Yeah, not necessarily certified.
But
I think they're
registered or,
registration.
yeah, we can look into that. I haven't heard that one being used as a way to rein in ICE, but we can look into that for sure. Yeah.
Does that mean the state cannot require that they wear body cams?
So that's another element too. We haven't gotten into the body cam debate and what's constitutional and what's not. We haven't gotten that legislation up and drafted to see if that's something that we can do.
It was discussed in the hearing in Washington.
Yeah, yeah, because they're the ones who have the direct oversight over ICE. Yeah, in the back again.
Yeah, a month ago, I went to the city council and they had several people protesting the ICE facility at the town square or one town. And then the police officer there, the chief I think, was saying that, I know they're spread thin, but he offered that if you feel threatened by ICE, to call them and they will be there with their body cams and support you, keep us safe. So I don't know, with them spread thin, how they can, but he did offer that.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. We have a great police department in Southfield and Lathrop, and they do not enforce federal immigration law, and that's been policy of the police department for a long time here. And so, yeah, no, it's actually good that was a public statement that was made. Anything else on this topic before we kind of keep moving forward? This is a big one, this is an important one. I know it's alarmed the community, it's alarmed me as well. And we have to show some leadership here in the type of activities that we cannot stand in our community. And I think that what we've seen ICE do is among those. Yeah.
Just a note of thanks for seeing our legislators appear at protest and be visibly standing in public for rule of law, for civility, and for safety in our communities.
Of course. No, we matters. This makes a difference.
Just real briefly, yes, and thank you for all you do, but I'm not, again, what I see is ICE comes in, they do what they do, and people are taken into custody, and if they don't have a legal right to be here, they are taken into custody, they remain in custody, and there's nothing we can do about it. Now because they're gonna be charged federally. So the state can't, say, no, stop doing that, let my people go. They don't have the right to do that. They're being charged federally, they're being held federally, and even if we're successful in getting the federal cases dismissed, they go into, ICE custody and they're, deported after they're being held wherever, for however long they are. Is there anything we can do about that here?
We're doing as much as we can with the state law, right? But we are dependent upon a Congress who puts a check.
Somebody should run for Congress.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, so we depend on our federal government to have a check on what's been going on. And this has been an agency that, thank goodness they ousted Kristi Noem, but that's just, they'll replace her with the next one. And the federal policy is being led by this devilish character, Stephen Miller, who's a monster, and has used this department and this agency to target people. It is not making us any safer as a result.
Right.
In fact, it's making us less safe.
Right, the people I have seen that they are coming down on are people who have been here 20 and 30 years who have no record.
That's right.
Whose only crime is coming here illegally.
That's right. That's right. So if we want to have safe communities, I think we all agree that we should be focused on people who are criminals and actively committing crimes and are causing violence in our communities and are causing communities to be unsafe. When you hear these stories of the 5-year-old, being taken from school, or the barber who had a tattoo that they misinterpreted, or whatever, all these stories adding up of people who are not causing harm in their communities and in many parts are part of their community. It is a disruption. It is a disruption caused by ICE, not caused by the people that they're taking into custody. So we certainly are a nation that has to adequately and appropriately enforce our immigration laws. But what we're seeing play out, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here, is just abysmal. And it is not keeping us safer. If the goal is public safety, the breaching of due process, the stripping people of their constitutional rights, the separating of families, the detention of 5-year-olds, the killing of protesters in the street, calling them domestic terrorists, when we see the video that they were complying by the rules of protesting and were summarily pretty much executed, none of that keeps us safe. None of that keeps us safe.
There's constant confusion here. They had me take an FBI training course just because I take a lot of pictures and everything.
Yeah.
So they said, I am a target. People don't want those pictures out after, so I took the FBI training course. They still weren't sure what happened if they tried to take my camera, if like ICE or something like that. And they said, but if you fight, you have a right to fight back, because if they're not identified, but
they might shoot
also
you.
have a gun.
Yeah.
Huh?
But they might shoot you.
They might shoot you.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's worse, then you can have to go back and sue them or something. But it's just like, there's still like a lot of vague areas.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and they're empowered to do it when, again, when you see a video of a protester that's been shot umpteen times, and you have a Secretary of Homeland Security who comes out that day and calls that guy a domestic terrorist, but then later gets a little bit more contrition and says, well, maybe it shouldn't have happened. When you see that you can operate with impunity, you will. When you see that the top person in your department is defending your lawless actions and then adding more untruthful information into the narrative, you will continue to do so. There have to be safeguards on how this department operates, and I think it's just far beyond where we can control it anymore. There's no public trust in ICE anymore. And it's just, I don't think that the rot can be controlled. I think it's gotten to the whole agency, and we have to figure out how to keep our interior safe without any of the tactics that ICE has employed over the last year or more.
So let's
Yeah,
talk about systems change. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So as long as Stephen Miller and his buddies and whoever's going to be, I can't think of the multi-syllable guy's gonna be the next.
Mark
thing.
Wayne
Blah, blah,
something,
blah.
yeah.
He's sort of a thug, if you will. So what I'm really concerned about, everybody keeps saying, okay, let's wait till the midterms. My fear is that there won't be midterms because they'll be so messed up with who can vote that we'll be stuck with this, you know? So what can we do?
So a few things. You bring up some good points. There have been challenges in the courts that have been upheld against ICE. So they have been filing challenges in the lower courts that are making their way through. And I am not parading the integrity of the US Supreme Court. Don't misconstrue it. But for the most part, our courts have held on this issue. And so through our process, they have been siding against ICE's tactics. With your comment on the elections, I think there is a lot of fear and anxiety over this. The good thing is our elections are decentralized. Our elections are operated locally. And so when Trump makes this threat to federalize the elections, number one, it will not happen. It will not stand. Donald Trump will not come in and run Michigan's elections. We will not stand for that. And our elections are run at the local level. That's the way to keep them secure, that there are 1,500 municipal clerks that operate each election, and there's no central person that can turn a spigot off or turn it on to create havoc in our election systems. I chair the elections committee in the Michigan legislature, and so our election systems are secure, our system is safe, our system is strong, and this election will happen in the state of Michigan, and it will be an accurate and a reflection of the will of our voters.
Just one last thing. I don't know, what's flooding my phone in the last couple of hours has been that the Supreme Court's going to decide that write-in ballots will only be for the, if you get it in on that day. So if you're out in Guatemala or wherever I am, then it's mail, but it doesn't show up. The courts are going to hold that that's okay.
We don't know what the court's going to rule yet, but in the state of Michigan, our state constitution does allow for out-of-state or out-of-country people who don't reside in the country but are still Michigan voters and are overseas military personnel. It allows their vote to count up until the Monday after Election Day.
So I know I need to be a better informed citizen. So even though if the Supreme Court changes.
Well, that would overturn what's in our Constitution, and they haven't gotten to that point yet. So, listen, I share your alarm and anguish about this administration. It's reckless, it's lawless, it's chaotic, and I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to rule. But we have to deal with the facts as we have them now, and then figure out what to react to when something actually happens, right? Donald Trump says a lot of things, and not all of them are implemented, implementable, or happen. And also, too, which is really, really important here in Michigan, all of the ways that we have provided access to early voting. All of the opportunities, it was not 10 years ago where you couldn't get an absentee ballot unless you were affirmatively out of the community or of a certain age. Now you can get an absentee ballot for any reason, and you can even sign up to get an absentee ballot mailed to you every single election, because you can be on the permanent absentee list. So that you can say, I'm always going to vote absentee, I always want my absentee ballot mailed to me. We also have 9 days of early voting as a result of the ballot proposal in 2022 and the law that I wrote that allows for early voting. 9 days of in-person early voting here in the state of Michigan. And you can actually feed in your ballot and see it counted on the spot. You can actually take your absentee ballot, and you don't have to worry about, oh, is it going to get lost in the mail, or what happens to it when I mail it back. You can take your absentee ballot and go to an early voting site and feed it through the tabulator so that you are assured that it counts. So we have so many options to make sure that before Election Day, from 45 days when you can get an absentee ballot, or 9 days before Election Day that you can early vote, that you can and will participate in our democracy. We'll go around the room, and Jamie, I'll come back to you.
And,
We'll go for it.
and real quick, I just want to add on to that too. I know that the election, the upcoming election is something that we are all concerned about. I know I've had conversations with our Secretary of State, and based on the conversation we've had, she is very aware of all the things that have been said by the president, and she's doing everything she can to protect our elections. If for some reason this court case, which they had oral arguments today, about being able to get having your vote count after Election Day, that was the basis, pretty much the basis of the case today, was if you get something, if votes come in after Election Day, should they count or not? Even with all the things that we put in place and what other states put in place, if that were to happen, they are already looking at the things that they can do, they being secretaries of state, the clerks, how to be able to get that information out to people. If it's making sure, get your vote in before Election Day if you can. In my district, I will say the majority of the voters actually do some either absentee or early voting. Very high numbers, in fact, like 60 or 70%. So there's that 30% that we have to make sure that they get their thing. Actually, with the 70% too, we don't turn in your absentee ballot day before, kind of thing. Or if you do, turn it in person. So it's making sure that as these things come up, we are addressing them. We are educating people and making sure that we are protecting the vote. It is something that, I just did this trip. I actually went on a trip with the Secretary of State to Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and we walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It was a great experience. But we did we toured some sites, and these are all these places in Alabama, and Birmingham, and Montgomery, and Selma. All these places where people were fighting literally just to have the right to vote. Went to a museum, and we looked at, poll taxes, and we looked at all the questions that you were asked, you had to answer when you were trying to vote, and it's just, there's so many barriers that have been put in place to deny people the right to vote, and I'm kind of seeing it right now, and that's why when I'm talking to Jocelyn Benson, this is something she does every year. She does this trip to Alabama every year. She used to work there. She worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so, voting is something that's very important to me, very important to Senator Moss, and it's something that we fight very hard to protect. And I know I'm not going to stand in the way, Senator Moss is not going to stand in the way, and our election officials aren't going to stand in the way and stop people from voting, especially after I just came back from this trip and I saw the places where people were literally beaten and hung, and all the things that were done to stop people from voting. So just know that we are aware, and it is something that we are aware, and we are going to protect everyone's right to vote.
And Congress needs to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as well to affirm these things federally.
Yeah, we need to get somebody. I mean, I don't know who could do it, but we need members of Congress who will fight to get that in place.
We'll come around the room. So if your hand's up, we'll get to you. We'll start over here.
But it's also incumbent on every single person
to use that right to vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Talk
Yes.
to your neighbors.
Yes.
There are so many people who, I don't know who it is, so, they don't do any research. And one of the reasons, I've been an absentee voter, I voted when I was 18 at the polls, but since then, I've always done absentee, so I have that several weeks, because there's always something that pops up that I don't know.
Yeah.
And you have time, but talk to your neighbors, encourage people to vote. The number of people who show up to vote in this country is abysmal.
Yeah, especially midterms and local
Yeah.
elections, they never get as much attention, but your school board's just as important if you care about your kids' education. Yeah.
And I think we're all aware of the keep money out of politics, but please get a petition, we only have a few more weeks. Make sure that people know about this, at least when they have it, hopefully on the ballot. And the dynamics of it just makes sense for everyone. And I hope you all know the petition we're talking about.
Talk about it.
Well, Amy, you're,
Well, it's a petition to prevent large corporations and utilities who get large state contracts from being able to donate to political candidates.
the 250,000, right?
250,000.
250,000 is it.
So it's on a state level, a way to help do away with Citizens United as much as possible.
And only a few years ago, they were, 8 million? These corporations that were all the same across the board. And now, what was it, 300 and some million last election 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
elections cost more and more, as you guys
Yeah.
probably know.
And the
And
lobbyists,
because of that,
yeah, it's the lobbyists that are,
Right, any other hands, we'll keep scanning.
If I could say one
Yeah.
other thing, the other thing people can do about voting is volunteer with your clerk's office to work on election day.
Yeah?
It's eye-opening and it's a wonderful civic duty to do it. I've been doing it for years and it's so fascinating and interesting, but, we're the people who have to stand up and help people vote and count the votes, and that's a great way to get involved.
Yeah. We'll end with you, Jamie, so we'll come back around, like, get some new voices. Yeah,
Totally different topic.
we'll take any topic.
First, I want to thank both of you. I know you've been strong supporters of water affordability, trying to get legislation passed for that. And Senator Moss, I know you're a sponsor of the current legislation in the Senate that we hope to have in the House soon. But even if we got state affordability legislation tomorrow, it would still take a couple of years to ramp up this, to get the system going. And right this minute, we have hundreds of thousands of people in Michigan who are having trouble paying their water bills, and there's no federal assistance. And at the moment, I understand there's not very much money proposed for the next budget. So I have two questions. One, and so it's estimated that the need, if a third of the people who were eligible for water bill assistance money applied around the state, that would be about $65 million is what you would need for the next fiscal year 27. That would be the need. So the first question is, what can you two do to help us raise that issue so that it's a budgeting priority? And then what can the rest of us do to make sure that it becomes a priority and a reality in the appropriations process?
So last term, we did appropriate some money for water affordability, a lot of water things, water infrastructure, helping communities replace lead lines, things like that. I had to check to see how much is being proposed this year. We are going through our budget process right now. It started with the governor making an executive recommendation, and I can't remember if it had that in it.
It didn't have 65 million.
Okay.
I'll see that.
But but the House and the Senate are going through their processes now. It's one of the things that we're actually going to do this term because we literally have to, per the Constitution. And it's actually, we've been doing hearings on the budget now. I know I've testified on a couple of things for my district, including $2 million for Laker Village to get a new public works building. We've been, as we're going through the process, this is actually something that's good for us to hear. I know I'm gonna be a part of a conversation tomorrow talking about, I think, the House versions of the water affordability package. But also that appropriation, the budgeting part too, that's good to know as we're going through the budgeting process and being able to advocate for that. If 65, maybe we'll say higher so we can get
65 million is the, is the number that would cover the people that would apply for the assistance if it were offered. So like in our area, I mean, the Great Lakes Water Authority has raised rates well above the rate of inflation for 2 years in a row. And the RAT program, which is GLEWA's assistance program, has nowhere near enough money in it for all the people who need it. So I can tell you that for fiscal year '24, the legislature allocated 60 million, but for this year they only allocated 5 million. So in a time where affordability is a big issue and a big word, big word about. I would just suggest that this is something that's really important.
Okay.
We agree.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we're early in the budget process, but we'll keep you informed and please continue to reach out to us. We agree with you.
Super,
Yeah.
thanks.
Do you have a question in the back?
Yeah, well, just a couple things. The petition that was just mentioned about keeping money out of politics, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in signing, I have a clipboard and sheets, so please feel free to sign that. The question I did have was about the elections, though. You mentioned how fortunate it is that those are mostly handled locally. However, in our case, at least in Southfield, just this past November, of course, we have a Trump-supporting election denier who managed to sneak into the clerkship, who has not, in fact, even denied having been at January 6th himself. I'm curious what you think, what kinds of skullduggery he might get up to in terms of, say, ballot roll purges or ballot invalidations, and I guess how voters could be vigilant about those sorts of things. I guess maintaining their registration, checking up on things in the lead up to the midterms.
So there's many ways to answer that question. Everything that is done on election day, from counting absentee ballots to handling the polls to processing those ballots, have to be watched over by Democratic observers and Republican observers. So it would be very difficult for one singular person to be able to get away with something without many, many eyes watching it. We also have the county clerk, who oversees, the county processes and could flag things at the local level that do not look right or do not seem right. A clerk can't unilaterally do these types of things without many, many eyes watching over. We had a situation several years ago where the Secretary of State had to actually take over elections in Southfield for a set of different reasons because of challenges in the office. So because of our decentralized system, because clerks manage the elections at the local level, but then we have a county clerk, and then we have a Secretary of State, and then we have challengers from both parties and observers from both parties and boards of canvassers at the county level and board of canvassers at the state level. It would be very, very difficult for one person to be able to manipulate one part of the system without other parts of the system catching it.
Okay.
Yeah. We're over time, but we can keep going around the room. Yeah.
Okay, zoning issue, real quick, I came up with an idea. It might be a little bit more controversial than what the governor is proposing, but instead of making cities, villages to the state in charge of their zoning, it would instead require a certain percentage of people in income brackets have to live in that city. And then the city would have to figure out how to deal with the issue, the way they would want to, back to the local level.
It's creative.
It's actually not new. And then there was the bill I talked to you about the last time I saw you, and I just have a copy of it. You guys didn't get back to me.
Okay, yeah, just hand it off to me and then we'll follow up.
And with that other bill, with Rowan's law, is that Representative Regis's bill? Or-
I think so, Republican.
Yeah, I'll have to see which committee, because I remember we chatted about it. So each committee chair has a bit of autonomy on what they can bring up on the agenda. And I think the last time I checked this one out, I would have to connect with the committee chair and see where it's at in the process.
Yeah, I think it's in the Committee on Housing and Human Services. This Senator Erwin is the chair of that committee. I think that's the bill.
I'll look it up. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Any update on the lawsuit against Matt Hall and the Republicans around appropriations removals?
No update, not yet. So obviously, Matt Hall used a law that allowed him to unilaterally strip 60, how much was it? $650 million out of the budget that went to our communities, including Lathrop Village, including many other places, for infrastructure, for community support, for kids with cancer, for fire trucks, for all sorts of different things that were passed in the budget and signed into law. And Matt Hall used a law that was obscure and probably abused to reel back $650 million in funding that he just happened to not like. So the Attorney General said, well, it turns out that that law was unconstitutional to begin with. There's now going through the court process. There hasn't been a resolution to that yet, so we don't know.
Two things, Lathrop Villagers and Friends for Democracy is holding a No Kings rally this Saturday from 1 to 2 in front of City Hall, right along Southfield Road. The last No Kings, we had over 400 people in our little village, so we welcome everyone, just from 1 to 2. It's always peaceful.
I have a question about that too. Who are the main organizers for that?
Kim Hodge.
Okay. I noticed that it's not in the list with the other.
We
won't
we
allow
wondered
it.
about that ourselves.
Okay.
Because we're within 5 miles of another one, and they didn't feel ours was big enough.
Although I thought I saw something on Facebook today that they had figured out how to get it listed, but I could even say, I didn't read it, I scrolled past it, but.
So we're just trying to get the word out because we have 400 people in front of our little city hall on October 18th, so we're hoping.
Yeah.
There's
We're wrapping.
The second thing is that, I know we talked about elections, but my big concern is Trump is already deranged and all of his minions are as well. And so their backs are against the wall. They have all kinds of problems. They're gonna have all kinds of problems with the midterms. And they're not gonna want them to happen. And they're gonna do everything they can. And they're not gonna follow any laws to do it. So
And again,
I know we
believe me,
have a place, but their backs are against the wall.
yep.
They're gonna become more deranged than.
I don't disagree with any of that. We have to manage where we are now, and not kind of go down rabbit holes of what could be, although people are prepared. I will also say this, he was deranged in 2020, and he tried to overturn the 2020 election, and our systems helped. And our systems have only been strengthened since 2020. We wrote laws to strengthen the certification, to strengthen the canvassing, to strengthen our voting system. So our systems are stronger than the system that did hold in 2020. And I want to infuse confidence in folks that we've even shortened, narrowed the gaps that he tried to exploit in 2020 that still didn't take hold. I believe in our systems. I believe our systems will hold, and we will manage any crisis as it comes up.
All right.
Yep. I think I saw a hand in back, and then we will close with Jamie. Yes.
Hi, I'll be real quick. So, I know we're talking about really big issues here, but one of our issues that we came to discuss, being that we're both registered nurses, we're in the process of getting our nurse practitioner degree at Wayne State University. So Michigan is one of the states that does not grant NPs the full practice authority. So I don't know if you are familiar with the House bill that is trying to get passed to grant that. So we just wanted to know what your stance is, if you have a stance on that issue.
I don't yet. I was for it, and then I wasn't, and then I'm for it. I mean, so this bill actually came through my committee, and there were a number of people who testified in support of expanding the scope of practice for nurse practitioners. One of my colleagues, who's a representative from the UP, he brought this legislation because in the UP there's concerns about just there are not enough healthcare professionals. And so he is trying to, as we create more infrastructure for healthcare professionals, introduce this legislation to help kind of alleviate that. Additionally, there is a lot of I had a tour with Corewell, and they explain how they use nurse practitioners in a lot of different ways. We have school-based health centers here in Southfield and around the state that use, they're actually kind of invaluable to a lot of young people when they need some kind of medical assistance while they're in school, and a lot of them are staffed by nurse practitioners. And so by a lot of different people, they explain the importance of having nurse practitioners be a part of this and expanding their scope. But then I get my doctors, my doctors who are concerned about the level of training that they've had to go through and the things that they see, and that they sometimes notice are missed by other people, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, because there's legislation to also expand the scope of practice for physician's assistants as well. And there's been a concern around medical doctors, around like there's a lot of there's a reason why they go through so much training, and they're noticing things that are being missed sometimes by nurse practitioners or other people.
As a nurse, the nurse practitioners catch even more because they spend more time with the patients.
Can I remind
There's
you,
another
the whole
side of
reason
that.
we don't have midwives is because doctors who were men back in the 1920s and late 1800s got rid of it and called them witches and everything else underneath the sun. And it's just until now that midwives are coming back. So I have a huge issue with that
So
argument.
I'll say this to save Jason. I'll say this.
I was gonna say, I
we
haven't made a decision.
This is apples and oranges, and I brought this up at our Bloomfield meeting. I know this is not a direct comparison, but years ago we had nurse anesthetists that wanted to expand their scope, and the anesthesiologists fought against it, and it was a big conflict between the nurse anesthetists and the anesthesiologists. And then finally, we got everybody in the same room, and they started talking to one another, and we got a bill that expanded the scope of practice that everybody agreed on. Apples and oranges, I know it's very, very different with what's in front of you. I'm hopeful that everybody can come to the same room and have a conversation about their points of view, and just like the nurse anesthetist bill came to a compromise, I hope that we can land on a place where everybody's satisfied. I know it is challenging now.
I think there are options. There are a couple of options that I think can be explored, and I hope that we can get to a place, an equitable place, where both sides feel comfortable.
Jamie has the last word, because we gotta go.
Okay. Well, one of the things mentioned about talking to your neighbors and things, I have never talked to my neighbors so much, except in the last few months, part because of the political situation and the concern. Used to be, hi, good morning. Now did you hear about?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest concerns, well, you already know, first of all, I did mention that you are looking into that whole situation about payment, using the mail. But one of the concerns now is expanding mail also for voting. I think the Republicans are working on a new bill to stop forbidding, like you're saying, the state has a lot of protections, but they can't control the post office. And if we can't use the mail for voting. And it's also.
They're changing the postmark date, that if you turn in a piece of mail, it may not be postmarked the day that you send it to the post office.
Correct.
So that's very challenging, and I don't agree with that. But just remember, if you submit your absentee ballot, number one, you can feed it into the early voting feeder yourself, so you don't have to worry, is it lost in the mail? But also, we have a system on the Secretary of State's website that you can track your ballot. You can find out when has the clerk sent you the application, when has it received your application back, when has it sent you your absentee ballot, and when has your absentee ballot been received. So there's also in the law right now that there's a system that you can opt in. You're not required to use it, but you can use it to see when your absentee ballot was received.
But there is a tracking site also for how the post office, efficiency of the post office. And now, a couple of the post offices, a couple people retired, they are not replacing, they're trying to shrink the people at the post office to even slow the mail. But I already, actually, Jason knows this, I take my rent check in now, take it right to the post office, they stamp it, and I take a picture of it.
Yeah, good.
But you have to do, but they're really talking about doing this much more because of for voting and slowing down, which the state will have little control over.
We've got early voting for the very reason of letting people vote as early as legally possible here in Michigan. All right, that's it. We would normally, I think, be in Bloomfield the first.
Well, I just want one thank you to you, because a couple of these, for all this being here, but next month, you were talking about the voting and such, and your special guests next month, right across.
Oh, yes, we're gonna, for our senior summit?
Seniors.
Yes, we have our senior summit coming up. Many of you hopefully have received that in the mail. We will be having it in Pontiac and in Southfield. Thanks, Jay, that's a good plug, Jamie. We have our senior summit in Pontiac on Monday, April 13th. At Welcome Missionary Baptist Church. But for those of us in Southfield who don't want to make it all the way up to Pontiac, our senior summit is in the pavilion at 12:30. I have it on my calendar, I think. On April 17th, Friday, April 17th, midday, we have tables. It's kind of like a senior resource fair, and we'll have Attorney General Dana Nessel and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson as presenters. Amongst many other senior advocates, including State Representative Jason Hoskins will be there as well. So Friday the 17th in Southfield or Monday the 13th in Pontiac. Thank you. I appreciate it. We will not be having.
You put me last.
Yes, that's right. We will not be having our community conversation in Bloomfield the first week of April because it overlaps with Passover. But if you got an email to be here, you will get an email for our next event. So thanks.